Chairman of the panel, Mr. Jeffrey Lam, will be coming in a bit later because of other engagements. So for the time being, before he returns, as Deputy Chair, I will be chairing this meeting. So I declare we have a quorum, and I call to order the meeting of the panel on financial affairs. Members, during the meeting, please turn on the video cameras, Zoom, and show your faces and use the relevant color for your virtual background. The microphones will be operated by our technicians, whereas you should use the raise hand function if you want to speak. And we also have simultaneous interpretation service. You can choose the language channel in Zoom that suits you. We have 5 items for discussion today. And then at 1:30 p.m., there will be a rehearsal on remote voting system of the Legislative Council. So I need to make sure members observe the speaking time limit to make sure that we can adjourn this meeting by 1 p.m. So item 1, confirmation of minutes of the meeting and matters arising. The minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of January 2022 have been circulated to members via LC paper CB record 188 or 89/2022. The Secretariat has not received any proposed amendments. So if there are no further comments, please confirm the minutes. Mr. Tangapil, do you want to speak? Yes. I noticed that for the minutes, it was the first meeting and members raised suggestions on what to discuss, but I noticed that I became the deputy chair in the minutes. Please make sure this is not the case. This is not the case. Right. Thank you. Anything else? If not, the minutes are confirmed with the proposed amendments put forward by Mr. Bill Tang. And then next item. Information papers issued since the meeting on the 7th of February, 2022. Since the last meeting, the Secretariat has issued 10 information papers. Details are set out in the agenda, so please note these papers. And then next item. The next regular meeting is scheduled for the 3rd of May, 2022, Tuesday, 2:30. The administration is proposed to discuss the following 4 items. First, briefing on the work of Hong Kong Monetary Authority. 2, updates on the Financial Services Development Council. 3, legislative proposals to implement a risk-based capital regime for the insurance industry of Hong Kong. And then 4, proposed legislative amendments to the Bankruptcy Ordinance and Companies Winding Up and Miscellaneous Provisions Ordinance. Members, do we agree to discuss these 4 items at the May regular meeting? All right. Yes, Ms. Starili. Yes, I agree. I have no comment. So I see we all agree with the proposed items. And then let's move on to the 4th item, review of rating system. And let me welcome representatives from the Financial Services and the Treasury and the Rating and Valuation Department. To ensure smooth conduct of the meeting, I will invite my staff to remove all the raised hands markings first. Members who would like to speak, please use the raise hand function now, and I will invite members to speak in turn. I will first invite Mr. Christopher Hui, Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury, to deliver opening remarks. Over to you. Mr. Wong, members, the Financial Secretary announced in his 2022-23 budget speech the government's proposal to introduce a progressive element to the rating system and implement a new rates concession mechanism. Today's paper sets out the proposed framework and parameters. Let me now give a succinct account for your information. First, to further uphold the affordable users pay principle and to generate additional revenue, we recommend introducing a progressive element to the rating system for domestic properties. Under this proposal, domestic properties with a rateable value of $550,000 or below would continue to be subject to rates levied at 5%. For domestic properties with a rateable value above $550,000, the first $550,000 would similarly be subject to the current 5% rate, whereas the next $250,000 would be subject to 8%. For those with rateable value above $800,000, that's above the two brackets mentioned, it would be subject to 12%. Under this proposal, around 42,000 private domestic tenements are estimated to be affected. That accounts for only 2% of all the domestic tenements in Hong Kong. So in drawing up the proposal, the government have had regard to the affordability of ratepayers of private domestic properties, including the fact that rateable value reflects market rental value of the property, the number of ratepayers affected, and the additional rates to be paid. The estimated additional rates revenue, as well as the need to maintain a simple rating system. Tentatively, we plan to introduce the progressive rating system in the fourth quarter of 2024-25. The estimated additional revenue generated for the government is $760 million. In the PPT, we've illustrated the implications of the progressive rating system on domestic properties with different rateable values. The second proposal relates to a new rates concession mechanism for domestic tenements. The objective of this proposal is to address concerns about owners who hold multiple domestic properties enjoying multiple relief under the existing system. So we propose to grant rates concession only to owners who are natural persons, and each eligible owner may claim rates relief for one elected property. This is to ensure a more targeted approach in providing rates concessions. Taking the rates concession level in the 2022-23 budget as reference, the proposed new rates concession mechanism for domestic tenements would help the government save around $3.1 billion in future one-off concessions. Tentatively, we plan to implement the new mechanism in the third quarter of 2023-24. Public rental housing, however, would not be affected. The PPT, as you can see, shows implementation details, including eligibility and the relevant dates for members' reference. Paragraphs 20 to 23 of the paper explain our consideration on whether the primary rates liability should be shifted from occupiers to owners. On review, we believe such a shift of primary liability will bring unnecessarily inconvenience to landlords and tenants of around 400,000 tenements, mostly non-domestic tenements. And they may have to renegotiate the terms of their tenancy agreements. And meanwhile, the rating and valuation department will encounter difficulties in locating some owners who are not ratepayers. For example, they may be residing overseas and may in turn lead to a higher default rate and potential bad debts. In addition, the shift has limited impact in practice, as currently rates of more than 90% of domestic properties are already being paid by owners. Therefore, we propose to maintain status quo, and that is for both owners and occupiers to be liable to pay rates. Chairman, that concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to take views from members. Thank you. Thank you, Secretary. The floor is now open. I'm going to invite members to speak, and if time permits, after finishing the first round, I may invite members to raise their hands and speak again. Let me read out the speaking order. Mr. Wong Chen, Mr. Chen Wei-leung, Mr. Harry Lee, Mr. Tan Yue-heng, Mr. Bill Tang, Mr. Chen Kin-po, Mr. Long Hon Bill, and myself. Each member is to be given 4 minutes for questions and answers. We start with Mr. Ronald Chan. Thank you, Chairman. We have a narrow tax base in Hong Kong, and government revenue is by and large affected by our economic situation. The rating system hasn't changed for 2 decades. And now under the affordable users pay principle, this new proposal shows the government's willingness to make a change, so I support it. I have 2 questions. First, after introducing a progressive rating system, the government estimated $7.6 billion or $760 million rating concession savings. However, it is expected that those subject to a higher rate will file an appeal. And according to the paper, a new system will have to be developed for introducing the new rates concession mechanism along with the upgrade of the core elements of the system. Now, the additional revenue estimated is $760 million. Have you made an estimation of the additional cost in developing or upgrading a system? Now, next question, if for joint properties, one of the owners can claim rates relief, but then there may be a combination of combination of portfolio of properties among multiple owners. To avoid dispute, should the agreements be put in black and white, or should it be subject to an agreement among themselves? Perhaps an owner may have 3 properties, and the owner may wish to elect the property with the highest rateable value for relief. Secretary, let me take the second question first, Chairman, and that is the additional cost or manpower needed for introducing the overhaul. Indeed, we estimate a one-off cost of $250 million and also some $100 million recurrent expenditure. The cost entailed involves additional manpower as well as the new rates concession mechanism. The new computer system will have to be built along with upgrading of the existing system over a 30-month period. They will have to be done sequentially. It cannot be done in one go. Hence the time needed. On resources, we need to be prepared as well. Another point Mr. Chan raised is that there might be more disputes arising out of the new system, and there might be more appeals on the RVD's decision. We do have a well-established mechanism, and in a moment, Kevin, the Commissioner, can give you more details. We will look into the issue, and we'll also invite the claimant to submit further information for our consideration and the justifications put forward. Let me now defer to Mr. Kevin Seal. Yes, Commissioner. Please be succinct. We're running out of time. Kevin, Mr. Sale.
We cannot hear you yet. Please do unmute. The Secretariat, can you please help? Oh, thank you, Chair. Now, every year after the evaluation on the rateable values in March all the way to May, there is a time period for the people affected to raise any objections through filling in a form concerning the rateable values estimate. When we receive their views, we will review the relevant information, and also for the results of the review, we will, by the relevant period, that is by November, we will reply to the appellant. If the person is not happy or satisfied with our review, then the relevant person can go to the Lands Tribunal for further appeal. Now, of course, we would gather all relevant rentals data and relevant information in the review of each of the cases. Now, the time, we have exceeded the time, but actually I think Mr. Chan had been asking about joint ownership situation, whether the authorities can help with any conflict that may arise out of that kind of situation. But because the time is up, we have to go to the next member, Mr. Chan Man-ki. Chair, I'm also in support of the amendment as proposed by the authorities so as to reach the affordable payers pay system. Now, for April 2017, the government had set up a tax affairs policy group. And at the time, the FS said one of its purposes was to review the tax base and to increase the tax base and increase government tax revenue potentially. So I do not know whether this proposes one of the directions studied then. And in increasing tax revenue for the government, in fact, it is very minimal, actually. It is under the progressive system. It is just 760 million in increased tax revenue against a $31 million in terms of expenses. So would there be further reviews from the government so that in the future, for tax revenue, this is but a beginning? Would that be the case? As Mr. Hui. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. For this particular arrangement, members would know that there is a savings and there is increased tax revenue. There are these two effects. For tax impact, I know that society is very sensitive about that because it impacts the pocket. So it needs more discussions within the Hong Kong society. And yes, it is true that if there is a group set up to study tax arrangements, and there had been a request to open another position to support the work of that group. And basically, the group looks at various tax arrangements and aspects to see how they can be enhanced, because sometimes it is not just about tax revenue point of view, but also now the head of the Secretariat or the permanent secretary is here, and it's been raised before, and that is the impact for the minimum tax and its impact on our economy and our tax revenue. There are a whole host of factors which we need to take into account, the impact on society, on economics, and on tax revenues, etc. And today we are focused on these two particular points, which are contained in our proposal. Starry Lee, next. Well, for many years, there had been similar proposals, and actually after years and years of discussion, we are now seeing this particular proposal, and I'm happy to see this. But I do hope that the authorities will continue to enhance and improve on tax arrangements overall. Now, one of the points I would like to raise is that for the allocation or arrangements for joint name ownership flats, and also whether the authorities can provide the public with relevant information as to the operation of the systems. And as Mr. Chan Man-ki had mentioned, Ronick had mentioned just now, there will be new computer systems, etc. So the public would need to know how they will interface with the new system. Now, there is another point, and that is for rates for some of the people who do not need to be paying income tax, etc., because they're already retired, let's say, and of a certain age, that are aged residents. Is there any consideration to exempt them from paying rates so as to relieve them further? We know that for poverty situation in Hong Kong, the old people in Hong Kong is actually a big proportion of that. Now, so if there should be a exemption of rates, that would be good. There had been a one-off measure for relief recently, but this is of course not done on a permanent basis. So how can we take care of the poor and old residents of Hong Kong, perhaps by exempting rates payment? Would you be considering that, please? Mr. Hui, thank you for the question. Thank you, Chair. If I can just talk about the thinking behind this proposal, and I will also be talking about how we can make the entire arrangement clear for the people of Hong Kong, the communication, and my colleague will definitely supplement on that. Now, Kevin's leading his team, and they are very capably supporting the review of this rating, of the rating system. Now, for the questions asked, we have considered them, one of which is the exemption. Now, as mentioned by Ms. Darili, we not only have to use our existing mechanism for the arrangement, but also we need a new element, and that is the old people will have to declare whether they are living in their own flat that is owned by them. And we will have to vet and review whether that is accurate. But for this review of rating system, for this round of proposals, everything's very simple and straightforward. But if we need to extend the exemption to the aged in Hong Kong, then we will have to go through a complicated round of vetting. So from an administrative and implementation arrangements point of view, for any of such arrangement as exemption to aged owners would make it complicated. And we want to be focused in our approach this time, and only owners of the flats will be eligible for the this new rating system. And to a certain extent, for the aged owners, where they are eligible under the rates concession mechanism, they stand to benefit as well. Sorry, Lee, follow up. Well, I hope given the new times, hopefully you will not close the door on a good proposal just because of administrative considerations. Right. It seems that there are a couple of members who have asked questions about joint ownership flats. Perhaps we can ask the authorities to answer those in one go later on. Yes. Next, Mr. Chen Cheng-ngok. Dr. Tan Yue-heng. Chair, I'm also in support of this proposal. And I see that the natural persons would be the entity to enjoy the new rating arrangement, and this would avoid multiple ownership situations. But there is a possibility where the person, the owner, because of personal need, may be owning more than one flat, and the flats are not for rent out purpose, but perhaps it is a family member living in a property, or one property is lived in the summer, the other in the winter. Now, if only one flat owned by the owner is to be eligible for this concession, then the concession of rates enjoyed by this person will be reduced. Given this, can you perhaps consider increasing the number of flats or properties owned by the person concerned? Or are there other solutions to address this possible situation? Well, in answer to Dr. Tan's question, we have had a lot of discussion concerning this. On the one hand, we want to be able to achieve our objective, and at the same time, we also have to take care of the overall community's considerations and needs, and also our administrative implementation. Now, whether there is a person with multiple properties, and it may be related to his economic means, and we basically want to focus on those who would benefit from this concession, to focus our rates concession mechanism on them. In this particular arrangement, we want to include such persons because the properties of Hong Kong is an asset, for economic asset for certain persons. And we want to be focused to basically benefit those who need this benefit and who are intended to benefit from this rates concession mechanism, and also to implement the affordable users pay principle. And just now, the situation you mentioned, the flats or the properties owned may be they may be residing in the properties themselves, or family members may be residing in them. And we might have to balance whether we are able to cater for everyone if we bring in new concepts, if it's not just about ownership, but about the function or purpose of that particular properties, that it would open up other considerations administratively. And therefore, we have consolidated all these factors in total and comprehensively, and we have come up with this straightforward approach. Next, Tan Ka-pyu. Thank you, Chair. A few aspects of questions. But before I answer questions, I want to first affirm my support for the review of the rating system this round. The very precious public assets of the government is focused or allocated to the most needy persons or families. So I am in full support of these two areas of amendment or proposal. Now, just on affordable users pay principle, the affordable user is defined as a person who holds a property which is of high value. But what about the user or the person with multiple properties owns? Let's say a natural person with more properties owned by him, then the rates would be higher. Would this be the thinking? Now, let's say 100 Hong Kong persons own 20,000 properties in Hong Kong. That's a huge number, really. So I'd like to ask this affordable users payment. What is the definition of affordable user? Apart from the property itself being of high value, would you also consider the number of properties owned by that user or owner? Would that also count as affordability, please?
The second point, we have big tenements in Guan Chai, Causeway Bay with subdivided units, each being rented by young people at a monthly rent of $15,000. So very easily, a tenement unit may have a rateable value well above $550,000. So if it's only rated as a single property, will there be a loophole? Will you be missing the luxury subdivided units issue? And about owner-occupied property involving just a single owner. In fact, if you ask the social welfare department, they do have information about elderly applicants reported to be owners. So you will have no difficulty locating the relevant data. Secretary. Let me answer the questions in general, and then I'll leave the rating issue with Kevin. About the point raised, and that is for owner of multiple properties, whether he should be eligible for rates concessions. And that is why for the second proposal, we should make sure that the owner of multiple properties can only elect one property for claiming rates relief, and that the owner should be a natural person. For the second point, for owner-occupied properties belonging to an elderly owner, we haven't devised a special mechanism for elderly owners. As long as an elderly owner lives in the property he owns, and if he meets our other criteria, he can enjoy the rates concession under the new mechanism. According to our data, 70% of the rate payers enjoyed this rate relief. So our policy is able to provide relief. And now the new mechanism provides a more targeted approach for us to help those in need. Right, you may continue, but the time is up. As for luxury subdivided units, rating and valuation of these properties, well, it's very complicated. And if you don't mind, I will ask Kevin to supplement. Yes, Commissioner, please very succinctly speak on rating evaluation and also respond to Ms. Sari Lee and Mr. Chan's point about the valuation for subdivided properties. We consider the requirements under the rating ordinance. In other words, we consider whether the property is for dwelling. So we, for example, check whether there are independent kitchen and toilet units. And depending on the circumstances of the case, we consider whether rates should be levied on the whole unit or on the subdivided units. On joint properties, under the new mechanism, in principle, each natural person may only claim rates relief for one property elected. So if he is an eligible owner as a natural person, and if this owner has elected one of his properties to enjoy rates concession, then all other joint owners can negotiate among themselves and find one eligible owner to make this claim. If one natural person has been elected, other owners not eligible for rates relief for this property can, based on their own circumstances, apply for rates relief for the other properties they own. Mr. Shankin Paul. Thank you, Chairman. In principle, I support the review of rating system. It has been so many years without progress. So every year when the budget is passed, there comes criticisms on the multiple property owners enjoying huge rates relief. And it is a loophole, so I support the new mechanism. I see that there'll be a savings of $3.1 billion in additional revenue of $760 million. It is crucial in enhancing this rating system. And in terms of primary rates liability, both owners and tenants will be liable. Like the paper suggests, 90% of the rates are already paid by owners. So there is no need to make a change. And I think this is true. I want to ask Secretary this question. Well, in fact, this question is put to the Commissioner, Mr. Seal. Let's say if you have two properties jointly held by two owners, can each of these owners apply for rates relief for each of the properties? Because if you refer to the term natural persons, I don't think anyone understands. Let's say if you have two joint properties jointly owned by two owners, then each can be eligible for rates concession for one of the properties. Likewise, for properties held by three owners. Is that true? Yes. In short, Mr. Chan's illustration is correct. Right. So for property held by two owners, both can enjoy rates concession for each property. Right. So I support it. Next, Mr. Kwok Wai-keung. Am I coming through, Chairman? But I also hear background noise. Thank you, Chair. A number of points. First, for owner-occupied properties belonging to elderly owners, they should enjoy rates concession. I support it as well. But according to the Secretary's reply, concessions are granted as a one-off relief every year. We want to ascertain the practice. We do not have retirement protection and back then we didn't even have MPF. Despite rise in rateable value or property value, elderly owners didn't benefit because it's for their own occupation. Coming back to this point, this proposal includes a progressive element to the rating system, and the other proposal is to require the owner to be a natural person in order to enjoy rates concession. We support these measures. Electing one property by a natural person. Well, this addresses the question always asked on why owners can enjoy rates relief for multiple properties. Now, but I do have a question on the three rates band in your progressive rating system proposal. Have you considered, for example, profits tax instead of progressing to a higher rate at the top level? There should be a reduction at the lower bands. Have you considered higher rates at the top and lower rates at the bottom of the spectrum? Well, let's hear from the Secretary first. Thank you, member, for the question. The flat rate of 5% has not been changed since 1999. So we're dividing the system into 3 rate bands, 5, 8, and 12%, having taken into account a number of factors. The first one being the affordable users pay principle. And for properties with higher rateable values, we need to consider whether concession should be, anyway, more rates should be levied, in other words. It is true that we need to consider a number of factors. Whether we should reduce the rates for lower bands. Since introduction of the 5% rate in 1999, overall speaking, the rate is on the low side. In 1976, it was levied at 18%, an even higher rate. So in 1999, we set the rate across the board at 5%. In a way, we've taken into account various factors so that we don't charge unreasonable or excessive rates. In 2021-22, around $13.7 billion revenue were generated from 5% rates on domestic tenements. Well, let's say if we moderately reduce it to 4%, the revenue foregone would be $1.37 billion. So any adjustments to the rates would have a significant impact on our revenue. The additional revenue under the new mechanism is $760 million. And that's right. So to address the members' other question on elderly owners, I want to make it clear that we're not depriving them of the concession they should enjoy, but rather we want to devise a system to make sure that the requirements can be met. So we're not building a tailor-made system for elderly owners, but we do have an arrangement for all eligible property owners to enjoy rates concession. Thank you, Secretary. Next, Mr. Long Han Pio. Thank you, Chairman. Am I coming through? I support the affordable user pay principle. A simple tax regime is a cornerstone to Hong Kong's success. It provides us with competitive edge, so we need to strike a proper balance. So my question for the Secretary is this. At the moment, the rating system is already a progressive one, because if you have a higher rateable value, you're required to pay more in terms of rates. This is such a drastic move, and yet the additional revenue generated is just $760 million. That's about 0.1% of the total annual revenue. Is it worth it? Is it a reasonable balance? That's just a very simple question, Secretary. Thank you, member, for the question. Our objective is to abide by the affordable users pay principle in our tax regime. At the same time, we want to make sure that ratepayers with means will not be significantly affected. Let me explain about our 3 rate band system. For property with a rateable value of $40 million, according to our statistics last year, we're talking about some 2.2% of all domestic tenements. So for the 40 million property, the annual rateable value upon calculations is about $800,000. So that's the highest rate band. We're charging 12% for the highest bracket, but under the progressive rating system, the annual rates to be paid in addition will be about $13,000. So comparing this with the $800,000 annual rental income, we're talking about some 1.3%. So this is how we abide by the spirit of affordable users pay while not being too unreasonable. So that's the basis for enhancing the rating system.
I hope I've answered the question. Yes, Louis Long. No follow-up for the time being, Chair. Thank you. Yes, my turn then. A very quick question, Mr. Hui. As Louis Long had asked, and some other members had asked this similar question, and that is, with this amendment, the additional tax revenue or rates revenue is not significant or a lot. Is there an assessment process or appraisal system whereby after a period of commencement of this new arrangement, that there will be a review? Now, some people are worried in society that with this being opened as a first step in the future, that rates or other levies would rise. So is there a system or process to review this? And also the progressive rates arrangement, will it be widely applied to other areas such as land, rentals, etc.? Would Mr. Hui please clarify those points, please? Thank you, Chair. First of all, on your first question, of course, we review all that we do. This is a responsibility of our Bureau. Whatever we do with any new policy, we will look at the impact of the policies and to see whether there have been any inadvertent effects, etc. And we continue to optimize. That is our basic responsibility. We will, of course, do that. Now, as for your second question, let me see. This arrangement, well, actually, in the basic law, it is already enshrined, and that is for the rates for land, government rents, and the owner's responsibility for payment of land rentals. That has been already addressed in the basic law, and we have not put this into, and this is not part of the intended amendments for this round. Right. According to the paper, the government says that they would want to commence this new arrangement in 2023. That is the and this will be the new rates applicable for the fourth quarter of 2024-25. Any questions or any objections? I do not see any objections. If not, yes, we will go on to the next agenda item. The next agenda item is the preparation for the commencement of the new regulatory regime of the accounting profession. We welcome the government representatives, and they are from the FST, the Financial Services and Treasury, the Secretary, Mr. Christopher Hui, and his colleagues, as well as from the Financial Reporting Council, Dr. Hon Wong, Chairman, and his colleagues. Yes, Members who would want to speak include quite a few. But first, I will ask Mr. Hui again to introduce us the paper.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Chairman, members, the Legislative Council passed the Financial Reporting Council Amendment Ordinance 2021, or the Amendment Ordinance, in October last year to reform the regulatory regime of the accounting profession. According to the amendment ordinance, major regulatory powers in relation to the accounting profession, including the registration of public interest entities, PIE auditors and practice units, issuing certificates, inspection of units, and investigation discipline of practice units, and certified public accountants, or CPA, will be transferred from the Hong Kong Institute of Certified Public Accountants, HKICPA, to the Financial Reporting Council, which will be renamed Accounting and Financial Reporting Council, AFRC. Under the new regime, powers transferred to the AFRC will be similar to those vested with the HKICPA at present. Since the enactment of the amendment ordinance, we have been in close collaboration with AFRC and HKICPA in active preparation for the new regime with satisfactory progress. Early implementation of the new regime is conducive to the regulation and development of the accounting profession. We plan to introduce 3 items of subsidiary legislation into LegCo in May this year for implementation of the new regime. I'll highlight the salient points. The first item of the subsidiary legislation is commencement notice for the amendment ordinance. We plan to appoint the 1st of October 2022 as the commencement date in the notice, while some provisions will come into effect earlier in July. This is to facilitate the establishment of an advisory committee to advise on preparatory matters before the new regime comes into effect, and to allow regulation to be made, which will empower the FRC to access the HKICPA's records and information for setting up its register and building case database. The second item of subsidiary legislation is regulation on transitional arrangements and consequential amendments. It will provide for the mechanism for handling pending or ongoing cases under the new regime, as well as consequential amendments to other ordinances. The LegCo brief we submitted last year contains principles of transitioning various functions. Based on these principles, we have drawn up the subsidiary legislation to stipulate in detail the unit for handling cases at the different stages and the relevant procedures to ensure a seamless passage of functions and cases from HKICPA to FRC. The third item of subsidiary legislation is to amend the fees for issuing practicing certificates, registration of practice units, and fees for renewals. We gave an undertaking to the Legislative Council and the profession last year during scrutiny of the bill that the fees in the first year of the new regime will be exempted, and the subsequent fees will initially be set at a level no higher than the currently collected by the HKICPA. To implement the arrangements, we will amend the fee levels stipulated in the amendment ordinance to the HKICPA's existing levels for commencement on the 1st of October 2023. Apart from the above legislative exercise, the FRC has been formulating administrative guidelines and documents to make clear the regulatory directions in the future and the procedures for exercising the new functions. The FRC will continue to liaise with the profession and the stakeholders, and will finalize and publish the guidelines and documents after considering stakeholders' views. Our next step is to table the subsidiary legislation into LegCo in May 2022 for negative vetting for commencement of the new regime on the 1st of October 2022. We will maintain liaison with the FRC, HKICPA, and the profession under the new regime to further explore the various issues relating to the accounting profession and respond to the long-term development needs of the profession. We're happy to take questions and comments from members. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hui. Q&A time. Members, please ask your question for the first round, and then if we have the time, we will go into a second round. The following members will be speaking: Chen Ying and Wong Yuen-shan, and then we have others, and lastly myself for the Q&A, 4 minutes in total. First, we have Mr. Ronald Chan Ying. Yes, I was a member of the committee working on the amendment. So I've been closely monitoring the progress of this. I see that there will be an advisory committee set up. Now, this is a very important formation. I would like to know the constitution of this advisory entity. Let's say professionals versus non-professionals proportion. Would you have some thoughts on that? And secondly, with the arrangement and with the commencement date, the HAICPA will still be responsible for existing cases. Let's say for these cases, would there be a deadline of, let's say, a year or two that the ICPA will have to complete investigating and handling the existing cases on its portfolio within that time? Now, in passing the relevant work to the new organization, the AFRC, will they be employing some of the existing staff of the original entity responsible for such work, so that those employees will still have a place to go to, in a sense? Now, the questions were in 3 areas: people, procedures, and structure. Now, I'll answer the questions in that order. First of all, the people. First of all, some of the monitoring and regulatory responsibilities will be passed from the Hong Kong ICPA to the new entity, and that is the AFRC. And for the existing staff of the ICPA who are serving at present and they qualify, then there will be considerations for bringing them over to the Accounting and Financial Reporting Council, the AFRC, a new entity. Now, for where there are qualifications, reviews, etc., the cases that are being handled by the ICPA, including the disciplinary cases, all these cases are different, and the number of such cases are few, actually. And we therefore do not believe that we need to set a mandatory deadline for handling or completion of those cases. Rather, we would want to provide the ICPA with the necessary space in handling them. Third question concerning the structure, our thinking is that, as mentioned to members before, for the advisory entity, the FS will appoint 10 to 12 members, and they would include professionals, non-professionals, users of accounting services, the commercial sector, because accounting services is very important for our economic development. And we want to holistically reflect the whole economic system and its relation to the regulatory regime of the accounting profession. So stakeholders, including users, will therefore be included as advisors. We are still thinking this through, and we are still preparing for this advisory committee, so that when it's set up under the new regulatory regime, it will have its important role. Mr. Edmund Wong. Thank you, Chair. Because the COVID situation is still rampant and it has impacted the profession significantly, and the profession has a lot of worries harbored against this regulatory new regime. And I have different occasions asked the SSTB and the relevant authorities to provide a 3-year grace period so as to allow the profession to transition more smoothly and successfully. But I see the timetable as mentioned in the paper now, and I have to say that I want to have my disappointment marked and recorded here. Again, I would want to raise the possibility of a 3-year transition period. Hope that this will be considered. I'm looking at paragraph 34 of the paper, and that is, there can be a non-hearing, that there will be no hearing before disciplinary actions taken. And this is fundamentally different from the procedures now of the ICPA, which necessarily will have a hearing stage before disciplinary actions. So for the new AFRC, what are some of the checks and balances for its decision, for, let's say, disciplinary decision, so that it is fair and just and transparent?
Another question. I explained to the FSTB and FRC on numerous occasions the sector's concern. We believe we should take an educational approach to help the sector adapt to the new regime. And the FRC already explained that for a start, an educational approach will be taken. So what about the regulatory standards? Will it be similar to those adopted by the HKICPA at present? This is also the sector's concern. Another point, at the moment, in the sector, we have so-called registered profession, certified professional accountants, people wearing different titles, claiming to be accountants. For the sake of the healthy development of the sector, do you have any plan so that after transferring the powers from the HKICPA to AFRC, something can be done to tackle these so-called accountants? And last point, during the 10-year period from 2009 and 2019, the audit fees rose by less than 1%, just 0.9%. We couldn't even catch up with the inflation rate. And Chairman Wong also commented that it's difficult, therefore, to continue to provide quality services, and we're deterring young people from joining the field of auditors. So I want to know whether some standards on fees will be introduced similar to those in Singapore to help the sector stay afloat and promote healthy development. Secretary. Thank you, Edmund. All along, I must thank Edmund for reflecting the views of the sector, in particular the plight the sector faces in times of the epidemic and their difficulties. Next point, let me turn to some basic principles. The members concerned after transfer of powers, whether the regulated profession will have more on their shoulders. I've already explained in my opening remarks that the powers transferred to the AFRC are similar to those already vested in the HKICP at the moment. So we're not making things even more difficult for members. So be reassured. About the dollar sign, we previously had ample discussion on exempting fees for the first year, and then we'll commence charging fees at the level that is similar to that charged by the HKICPA, because after all, we need to cover the cost of the new regulatory regime. Third point, about auditing, maybe I'll defer to my colleague Mr. Hoy to take a question, and then Kelvin can also supplement on the educational approach. Thank you, Secretary. Now, about investigation to be conducted, the cases will be taken up internally by the AFRC. That is for dealing with complaints, unlike the existing approach. Now, under the FRC, staff will be accountable to the board. And there is also a review mechanism set up under the ordinance. All decisions are subject to this mechanism. Any aggrieved subject can apply for a review directly with the tribunal. It's an impartial and open process. And if a subject is still aggrieved by the tribunal's decision, a further review can be sought. This level of appeal doesn't exist in the current HKICPA mechanism, so believe that impartiality can be maintained. We're behind schedule. We should move on to another member, Mr. Lam Chi-yun, Nelson Lam. Thank you, Chairman. I wish everybody good health. Thank you, Secretary. I agree strongly with the issues raised by Mr. Edmund Wong. He's from the profession. Perhaps he didn't have time to put other questions. So let me ask more specific questions now. First, on regulating the so-called illegal or bogus accountants, regulatory functions will be taken over by the AFRC. And for some time, I was with the HKICPA as a council member. I'm also a certified public accountant, and I have always urged the Institute to regulate bogus accountants or illegal accountants. At the same time, there are intermediaries promoting the accountancy businesses, accounting businesses, whilst not holding a valid license. And this is really this profession's concern. The second question is about manpower. I understand that manpower is a common problem among different sectors, and this is especially severe as far as the accounting profession is concerned. Another somewhat related point is that in the current COVID epidemic, the accounting profession is still indirectly affected. So I'd like the administration to tell me whether any relief is available. Edmund and Nelson are both very important communicators between the administration and the profession. Mr. Wong asked a question about fees, and Mr. Lam elaborated on the point about bogus accountants, persons claiming to be certified public accountants. These are problems hindering the development of the profession, and that is why we're setting up an advisory committee. It is an important reform for the professional development of the accounting sector. In fact, we can continue with this dialogue after the meeting, especially when Mr. Wong is also here, his chair, and we can continue to develop or discuss the development. At the same time, we want to have better alignment and liaison with our mainland counterparts, and also to address the development of the profession in Shanghai. I'll defer to Dr. Wong now. Yes, Chair of the FRC. Thank you for the questions. As pointed out by the Secretary, as the regulator of the profession, we don't just focus on regulation for the sake of it. We work for the prosperity and stability of Hong Kong. And as a regulator, we're empowered by the relevant ordinance. We also are mindful about the long-term and healthy development of the accounting profession. This will be our primary responsibility after being renamed as the Accounting and Financial Reporting Council. And in exercising our functions, we also considered the legitimacy of our council's functions. As chair of the FRC, if we take a regulatory approach such that we are stifling the room of survival for the profession, I don't think it will work. The purpose of regulation is to enhance the markets and the sector and expand the sector and the professional standards to make sure practitioners abide by their professional ethics. And only by achieving these goals will we have long-term healthy development of the profession. In fact, starting from the 1st of October 2019, we already started strengthening our work. For example, we started studies on regulatory matters and governance, and for public interest entity auditors. Like the member just now mentioned, the fees increase annually was only 0.9%. This figure shows a really complex issue. So as a regulator, we should continue to explore the reason why the fees are kept at a low level for a long time. And in fact, in February last year, after publishing a report, we discussed with the HAICPA and the profession on a continuous basis. We all hope that the profession will have a long-term healthy development. So after today's meeting, I hope we'll continue to be in close liaison with all the stakeholders to work out this issue. I think our common goal is to promote long-term healthy development of the profession. Next, Mr. Robert Lee. Thank you, Chairman. Secretary. In relation to the new regulatory regime of accounting profession, I'm in all support. I understand that it is necessary, and we need to make sure that the council will work independently, impartially, and fairly. According to the administration paper, there are a number of tasks that the council will take up, including recruitment. I'd like to reflect the views of the financial services industry, and I have a number of questions. In terms of increase in costs in the future, how do you make sure that it will operate smoothly? For the securities firms, the FRC started a new levy this year, and in August, we also increased the stamp duty on stock transfer. So for the levies and stamp duties, I reckon in the future, your operating costs will go up as well, with increase in manpower and workload. So how do you make sure you can keep the cost down? And also, how do you make sure that you will not incur unnecessarily costs as a result of increase in securities transfer? Secretary, I agree with you. Mr. Lee is all about sustainability. This proposal entails a transfer of regulatory powers and the relevant arrangements. Now, you just expressed concerns about listed companies and levying on transactions. We don't plan to change anything yet. As for the new organ to be set up, the government has its own injection, and the FRC has always acted with prudence, and we are the overseeing the body of oversight. Next, Mr. Lam-San-Kang. Please switch on his mic. Thank you, Chairman. I believe this reform will bring a chilling effect for the accounting profession. I think the whole profession is concerned. They're concerned about their future prospect. Because regulatory powers will be taken away from the HKICPA. There is also another proposal in relation to changing the election method for the Council of HKICPA. The HKICPA will see a drastic drop in income for not being able to issue practicing certificates. Can some of the fees collected in the future be passed to the HKICPA? Because after all, the institute has members' interest in mind.
Secondly, I'm very happy to have heard Mr. Hui saying that there will be arrangements for the sector, the profession to develop in, let's say, services in Shanghai, etc. Well, will this AFRC be looking for business opportunities for the profession? Will this be enshrined clearly as a term of reference of the AFRC? This is important because over the past 100 years of professional service and the accounting system in Hong Kong, this particular reform is an impactful one. It is an important one, and all the other professions will also be looking at this reform. I hope that this is a good one, and a beneficial one, this reform. Thank you, Mr. Lam, for the question. Thank you, Chair. For this particular reform or the arrangement, we are not moving all over to the AFRC. For example, the practice certificate is one thing. Yes, some of the parts will be kept, maintained at ICPA. For this particular transition period, and actually there is another paper about the election of the council, we are coming from a professional point of view and professional consideration for the conception of the entire entity and the process. So we look at it from the profession's point of view and also the development of the profession's point of view. Now, concerning Mr. Lam's point about future development, yes, there is a development responsibility which is enshrined in the terms of reference on the AFRC. In the LegCo session, which discussed a similar topic, this has already been voiced, and we will put in this as a part of the terms of reference of the AFRC. Mainland business development, training and education will all be within the ambit of AFRC. What about his last question, Mr. Hui? And that is providing the ICPA with certain funding from the AFRC. Well, for this question, the AFRC will have certain duties, and they do have income, but we also consider the transition arrangements for the profession. For the first year, there will be a total exemption of fees. And I hope this indirectly answered Mr. Lee's question. Next, Starry Lee. Starry Lee, would you please put the microphone on? Thank you, Chair. Concerning the reform of the AFRC in the last session of the LegCo, I have already reflected the profession's worry and also expectations on the AFRC. And that is, apart from regulation, they should also be promoting the business of the profession. And also in the bill for AFRC, it had been enshrined that they have the responsibility to promote the healthy development of the profession. Now, under COVID, even though the profession is not directly impacted, but they are definitely directly impacted. A couple of members have spoken to that already. including staffing shortage for the profession, long hours of work, etc., etc. All these, we hope the AFRC will help to resolve. And Mr. Chairman had talked about the auditing fee not being able to be increased over long years. Yes, we are concerned about that as well. Hopefully, with the relief of COVID, the work thereof can pick up speed, because with regulation in place, we do not see much promotion of business or fee revisions. Is there a timetable? Can the chair or ask that the timetable be discussed? And also, Mr. Wong had mentioned this before in the previous LegCo meeting concerning helping the development and the load of accountants. Right, Mr. Hui, can you respond on the, Mr. Wong, would you want to respond on the promotion of the health and business of the sector? Well, the further reform this round is not related or engendered from this particular issue. As mentioned on the 1st of October 2019, the council or the board of directors of the council had already put into a very prominent place on the development of the sector, and education is a major part of that. And 2 months ago, as mentioned, we have put out a report, and that is from our policy research department of ours. And the report is about providing directions so that for listed companies, audit committees can better dispose of their work, including in appointing and dismissing listed company auditors. We have been talking to the relevant related parties and stakeholders. Apart from communicating this to their clients, we have also talked to the HKIOD Institute of Directors, the INEDs, bodies, etc., and other stakeholders, hopefully through education and communication. On the one hand, we clarify the role of the audit committee of the listed companies, in particular in assessing the performance of their auditors. And this is actually does not have a causation effect with the reform. And we are putting in a lot of efforts in promoting the market, not just for auditors, but also for listed companies as an important stakeholder. Their responsibility is to put quality of audit in first and foremost position, rather than the fee of the auditors. So this is about the long-term development of the accounting profession. Even though our angle is different, but our ultimate goal is the same, and that is how do we enhance and ascertain the quality of auditing work. For any industry, they will have a fee, and this is a price point. It is not to be hinged to the quality of auditing work. If that is the situation, that it is not good for the profession. I mean, for the FRC and also for the AFRC, this will be a point of our work in concern. Yes, any supplement? Well, actually, Mr. Chair, Mr. Wong had been very complete in his response. But for our reform this round, it really is about the ICPA to focus on their professional work. For example, registration, certification, exchange of mutual recognition, examinations, assessments, and sector or professional development. So this is a multi-pronged approach, and in the arrangement of the reform this time, it is to allow the HKICPA to focus on their most relevant work. Next, Holden Chow. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Chair, following up on Ms. Starry Lee's point, in the last term of the lead show in the accounting profession Bills Committee, I was a member as well, and colleagues have put in a lot of time to study that bill. And now with this progress, we are asking about the role of the AFRC. I very much agree with my colleagues, Mr. Wong, Mr. Lam, and Starry Lee. From last year to now, we have been maintaining that the role of the future AFRC, we want it to be not only of a regulatory nature, but also promoting of the sector's interest and business. I have a view, and that is in the Bills Committee, it had already been raised. I do not know of its progress now. And the point is, as you know, ESG is something that is very much emphasized globally. And the listed companies, of course, have their own standards and accounting or auditing standards for ESG. I would like to know for the future AFRC, of course, I'm not an accountant myself, but I see a lot of accountants saying that they hope that there can be some new development in ESG or overall. And I'm asking ESG because it is emphasized by all in society. Perhaps ESG is a way forward, a new direction for their service, so that the professional accountants will have more work and a new direction of service that they can provide. In the bills come last year, we have raised this as a possibility. At this point in time, would we want to discuss this as well? And that is to think of ways as much as we can to help the profession. So that is my suggestion, Mr. Ho. Now, Mr. Chow had a very valid point, and that is how to, on the one hand, regulate and at the same time promote the industry. Of course, we want any regulatory system to provide for vibrant business for the sector. Now, for ESG, the ICPA already has certain thoughts along these lines, and they're in conversation with the SFC. And the future AFRC will have an important role to play. And I have mentioned just now, the ICPA, with this new arrangement after the reform, they will be able to focus on development. And in development of the profession, there are a few areas. One, standard setting, regulation, and the ICPA will have its own responsibilities in this regard. And secondly, manpower. How can we, for instance, in the mainland or in other areas, to have more experience so as to enrich their professional experience? Third, specific opportunities such as Shanghai. How can our accountants serve in or provide service in Shanghai? So this is not just about the AFRC, it is also the work of the ICPA and the work of us at the government as well, right? For my question, Mr. Hui, a number of members, colleagues have mentioned the following points. The first point being that in the future AFRC, how it develops and extends the service or the business opportunity of our sector, and how is it going to be sustainable, and also the continuation and transition of existing work. Now, this advisory committee, it says so in the paper that there will be such an entity set up. I just want to know concerning this advisory committee, what is its ambit, please? Would it include on a timely basis, provide for the AFRC developmental suggestions, that is to make promotions and development for the accounting sector, or whether there will be over-regulation, and if whether there will be stakeholders' views taken into account, not just of the Council of the AFRC itself, but rather the stakeholders to see whether the AFRC had been over-regulating, say. And this advisory committee, will there be a ICPA representative sitting as member, so to facilitate continuation?
Thank you, Mr. Wong. I understand there is concern on the advisory committee. The objective and the terms of reference are very clear. That is to advise on matter relating to the work of the Financial Reporting Council. So in relation to the supervision work and the management of the council, the advisory committee will be giving advice. About the other point, our thinking is that representatives from the accounting profession will be included. After all, we need to have the input from the ICPA as well. So accounting professions are important element, of course, that there'll be members from the profession. There are also other stakeholders joining the advisory committee because accounting services are intertwined with other sectors and other economic activities. And that is why the committee will comprise accountants as well as other stakeholders. I appeal to members to support our proposal so as to improve the regulatory regime. We've just completed the first round. Mr. Edmund Wong would like to ask questions in the second round. Let me see if other members would like to speak for another round as well. If not, then Mr. Edmund Wong, 4 minutes in the second round. Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me another round. I thank Secretary for his reply. I have a simple point to make. Just now, the Secretary didn't have time to respond to my question on fee income and bogus accountants. These are long-standing issues facing the sector, causing more difficulties for us. I understand that the AFRC is, after all, an important international trend to separate the regulatory functions. But I do hope that these issues can be resolved. Thank you. Secretary. Mr. Wong raised some issues, and these are issues that we have been discussing with the profession and the FRC. But of course, we'll be happy to continue listening to the views from members. So perhaps after the meeting, we can continue to liaise with you. Thank you, Secretary, for closing to agreeing with the sector's demands. That concludes the discussion. The government plans to implement the new regulatory regime on the 1st of October 2022 for the accounting profession. Do we support this proposal? Any objection? Okay, I don't see any objection. At this point, Chair, Mr. Jeffrey Lam is back, so I'll now give him the floor. Good morning. We now move on to the next item. Revising the election arrangements of the Council of the Hong Kong Institute of Certified Public Accountants. Let me welcome the FSTB to our meeting. To ensure that members can speak in a smooth and orderly manner, I will ask my staff to remove the raised hand markings first. All right, and then now, members, if you want to speak, please press the raise hand button in Zoom now, and then I will invite members to speak in turn. But first, let me invite Mr. Hui, Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury, to deliver opening remarks. Chairman Lam, members, as I reported to members in the last agenda item, we plan to implement a new regulatory regime of the accounting profession so that major regulatory functions and powers will be transferred to the Accounting and Financial Reporting Council for independent regulation. After adjustments to the powers of the Hong Kong Institute of Certified Public Accountants, I will continue to be responsible for important professional functions such as setting accountancy, professional standards, and registering certified public accountants. During the run-up to the implementation of the new regime, some electrical members and members of the accounting profession raised concerns about governance effectiveness and election method of the HKICPA Council. In response, in the past 3 months, we collected views from major accounting professional bodies and their representatives on various occasions, and quite some stakeholders believe that appropriate amendments should be made to the existing election method of the HKICPA Council so that the Institute could adjust to its professional functions more effectively under the new regulatory regime and establish an institutional linkage with the AFRC under the new regime. We agree that there is a need to revise the election mechanism of the Council to ensure that the Council possesses a sufficient level of professionalism and representation in supporting the HKICPA to perform its role. In addition, while enhancing the institutional linkage between the ICPA and the AFRC, the independence of the AFRC should not be undermined and the Institute's capacity in handling professional matters should be respected. Having carefully considered the views of stakeholders, we propose to make the following legislative amendments. 1. Raising the nomination threshold for election to the Council. The nomination threshold will be raised from 1 proposer CPA to 1 seconder CPA at present to 1 proposer and 9 seconders. The candidate's nomination should also be seconded by 2 AFRC Advisory Committee members under the new regulatory regime of the accounting profession. The amendment will enhance the representativeness and professional quality of the candidate. 2. Aligning the election cycle for elected council members. From an annual election of half the council, that is 7 members, we propose to change it to a biennial cycle with 14 members to be elected. This will allow the council to focus on professional matters during its 2-year term. And in response to the sector's concern about continuity, we propose to allow the vice presidents to continue to serve on the council as members after the expiry of their original term, should they wish to, once they have secured the necessary nominations for stronger continuity between 2 terms. 3. Improving the electoral and administrative procedures to enhance administrative efficiency and flexibility. Details of the legislative proposals are set out in the paper. We have liaised with stakeholders, including the incumbent HKICPA Council, the management of major accounting associations and representatives, who are in general support of the proposal. The HKICPA and various accounting professional bodies will consult their members on the proposal, and we will continue to carefully listen and respond to the views of the sector. In the past 3 months, I also personally participated in different consultation sessions. I can feel the sector's development and interest in our common goals. Our proposed amendments will help HKICPA prepare for the implementation of the new regime so that it can better adapt to its professional role under the new regime. We'll provide for transitional arrangements in the legislative amendments to ensure unnecessary burden would not fall on the shoulder of the Institute. It plays an important professional role, and the above proposal is crucial to the implementation of this new regulatory regime of the accounting profession. We urge members to support us. Subject to members' comments, we plan to table the amendment bill into LegCo for passage within 2022 and for implementation by the end of this year. With these remarks, I welcome comments from members. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Secretary. The floor is now open. I will invite members to speak according to the order shown. And if time permits, after completing the first round, I will invite members to speak again if you wish in the next round. Let me read out the names of members. Mr. Nelson Lam, Mr. Edmund Wong, Mr. Wong Yuen-shan, Deputy Chair, Dr. Johnny Ng. Each will have 4 minutes. We start with Mr. Nelson Lam. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. Before I put my short question, I need to lay out my background. I am an accountant by profession. I'm also a council member of the HKICPA. From 1973, since the establishment of the Institute, there hasn't been any change to the election method of the council. Well, this provision concerns the election arrangements of the council of the Institute. It doesn't affect the profession as a whole. At first, we only had a profession comprising several hundred practitioners. Now we have 47,000. We're the largest profession in Hong Kong. In the past few years, we witnessed issues being politicized by accountants. And at one point, the council moved a motion to reprimand the police. I think accountants should focus on their own profession. The point is, some members of the accounting profession are concerned that if we have outsiders being appointed as members of the advisory committee of the AFRC, they may not understand thoroughly our profession. Our accountants may not know them. I hope that the administration will make sure that these stakeholders will listen to the views of the profession. And meanwhile, the profession may get to know more about them. I hope more can be done in this regard. Secretary, Mr. Lam made a valid point and the government has taken it into account. For the advisory committee to the AFRC, this will be set up even before the new regime is implemented on the 1st of October. So that meanwhile, views from the accounting profession as well as the users' views can be incorporated in the AFRC's policy formulation work. Meanwhile, for members of the HKICPA, aspirants can be invited to join. So we will spend no effort in enhancing the work in this regard. Next, Mr. Edmund Wong. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Secretary. About revising the election arrangements of the Council of the HKICPA, according to the government, different stakeholders and associations were consulted, and the sector is concerned about a short consultation period. In fact, members were only consulted last Friday. The consultation process has been quite short. I hope that the government will take into consideration the consultation outcome. And according to the paper, the president and vice presidents will continue their term until the end of 2023 because of the revision. I want to know the justification for extending the terms of office. Next point, as raised by Mr. Lam, 2 members' nominations from the AFRC will have to be secured. Before a candidate is eligible. So my question is on composition of the AFRC. Do they know enough about our profession? Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wong, for your questions. Let me take your question on the composition of the advisory committee. As I explained just now, we propose to appoint to have 8 to 12 members of the AFRC appointed by the financial secretary. They come from not only the accounting profession but users of the accounting services such as the business sector. So we want to take a holistic approach in seeking views from all stakeholders so that the AFRC will be more tailor-made for the profession.
Secondly, Mr. Wong spoke to another point just now, and that is the consultation process. In the beginning of January, or rather in January, we have started the consultation with the sector and also Mr. Wong, Mr. Lam, and all the related individuals and bodies. We have been doing so. And this meeting is part of our consultation. And in May, the Bills Committee will also be another round to listen to members' views. For myself, for instance, I have met with 10 accounting bodies apart from the ICPA to consult their opinions. So the consultation is ongoing and we would very much want to listen to all's views. Mr. Hui, my colleague, will answer the other question. Concerning the chair and vice chair of the ICPA will be continuing their term for 1 more year. On the 1st of October, we will start with the new regulatory regime. But the election cycle for the ICPA with its term is slightly not in step with the new regulatory regime. That the duration in the time gap is too close. Because it is important that we have good transition and to have a good leadership, that is a leadership team that is familiar with the professional work or the regulatory work, and therefore we propose to lengthen the term of the sitting ICPA, and the chair and the vice chair will also lengthen their term so that they can focus on the transition to the new regulatory regime. Thank you, Sam. Next, Vice Chair, Mr. Wong. Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to ask Mr. Hui concerning the tenure. On the one hand, we want to balance between continuity, and secondly, of course, we do not want there to be constant elections for the ICPA. Given that, would you be considering the 2-year tenure and with a staggered half of the members stepping down approach? Will you be striking a balance to change that so as to balance between the two considerations as I have mentioned just now? And secondly, for the HAICPA and its future AFRC, the transition between the two and the cooperation between the two, this will have to be done well. Will you be considering for the Council of ICPA, for instance, in particular the chairman, to become ex-officials of the AFRC Council? And we are concerned and actually worried about the AFRC and its impact on the industry's future development. We are concerned. And we see that for ICPA, training is a very important part of their work. And another member had mentioned that they are worried that with the AFRC getting some of the income from the ICPA. How would that impact the ICPA's work? Because, for instance, for training, the ICPA will have a lot of work to do, and it may need some financing support. Mr. Hui, first of all, concerning the term of tenure, the 4-year approach, it had been suggested during our consultation, but we see that there are not that many persons from the community who would want to serve for a long 4 years. And so we have come up with this proposal because, after all, these are public officers. This is community service. It is not like, you know, many of you who are so focused, or Mr. Wong himself who's so focused on public work. And we really need to find the people who have the capabilities and the time they want to devote into this service. So that is a consideration. As for your second question, I'm not sure about your question. Are you saying you want to put the chair of the ICPA as official of the AFRC? Yes. Well, actually, the regulator and the regulated, there should be a line between them. Otherwise, the independence of the regulator may be compromised. And that is why in the election or the election arrangements for the council of the ICPA, we have designed it as such. If the nomination comes from the council, for instance, the distance or line between the two bodies, the ICPA and the AFRC, would be blurred. So we do not want to blur, even for the nominating right, to have that be blurred by the for the AFRC councils. That's why we have proposed the nomination structure as such. Yes, some of the work of the ICPA will be transferred to the AFRC, including some of the fee levying work, because the ICPA is no longer responsible for such work. They will lose that income source, it is true. And there will be 1-year exemption of fee from the AFRC. And there is, for the members of the sector, there is actually no additional financial burden. If anything, it is less given that arrangement. As for the ICPA, they can continue to levy membership fee on the basis of their areas of work. I hope you understand that design intent. Thank you, Mr. Hui. Next, Mr. Johnny. Thank you, Chair. I'm in support of this proposal. The accountants have a very important role to play in the Hong Kong's economy and prosperity. Now, apart from the continuity and the in the interest of continuity, I'm in support of this election arrangement. But what about young accountants? Let's say for those under 40 years of age, we want them to have more opportunities to support the development of the sector or their profession. That would be good. Mr. Hui, please. Yes, thank you for the suggestion. Now, if you're talking about something that is within our powers, for example, we can appoint certain members of the council that would be within our powers. For instance, let's say if we want to provide for a proportion of the council or a ratio of the members being 35 years of age or under, that's one side. But on the other hand, this is about a concerted effort, and the persons concerned will have to express their interest. And I'm sure the profession, as it continues to build up the young people, would be interested. of course, it is really the interested and the capable will be elected. We are completely open on that. I have another question, and that is, with revising the election arrangements of the Council of the ICPA, there are three areas. One, to raise the threshold for the election for the councillors, and also to provide the legislative proposal to the LegCo so that by the end of the 2022 council elections, this will have already come into commencement. And thirdly, because of COVID, a lot of the LegCo topics and proposals are still in the waiting queue. So for this particular election arrangements revision, is there a plan B in terms of timing, or is it no matter what, this will be the timetable? Because really things are so changeable now, including the timetables. I very much agree with my colleague, Mr. John Ng, as to whether we can have more young people participate. For the elderly, such as myself, yes, there is the so-called silver hair generation is really our treasure, and they continue to be very willing to serve our community. There are some professionals, and in fact some non-professionals, who are very familiar with the accounting service and sector. On this regard, I would like to hear your views, Mr. Hui. Well, first of all, in terms of your devotion and your capabilities of members, I have no doubt about that. And I hope that with your efforts, this bill will be passed, because indeed this is a very critical year. We have a lot of work in line, and all along we have been working so well with the Hong Kong ICPA, with their council. And the first paper there, for instance, that we have discussed on new regulatory regime. In fact, the ICPA had given us a lot of very good and valuable opinions. So we just hope that if we can alleviate them of their election work and burden, so that there can be smooth transition for the industry and for the regulatory bodies, that would be good. So this is extra efforts on everybody's part, and we hope you will understand. And where we, the FSTB, myself, and other colleagues can help you and assist in making everything smoother, we will do so. And another point, and that is, we very much emphasize the participation of different age groups in different sectors and professions, including the young. Well, the chairman just now had raised this as a point. In our design of the structure, we see people coming from different age groups. For those who want to really enhance the service of the profession, or those which have vision for future development, we want them all to participate so that it becomes an even more vibrant sector, so that the market will be even more developed. My other question was plan B. Any plan B on timing? No, I'm fully confident in you, Chair. I also feel that if you want to, by the year end this year, to be able to put this into commencement before the election of the ICPA, then I know well what I have to do in terms of timing. Any second rounds? No. All right, thank you very much. We thank Mr. Hui and his colleagues, and the government will, within this legislative year, to introduce the bill to the proposal, the legislative proposal to the LegCo, and before the AGM and the election of the IPCA, this will commence. And any questions or any objections? No objections. Perhaps you should all raise your hand. For all those in favor, would you please raise your hand? Any objections, please? All right. I see the result of the voting. Most are in favor, and we will duly minute that. Before we go into the next agenda item, I would want to say to everyone, at 1:30 today, the LegCo will have a remote voting system rehearsal. So this meeting, it will not be extended. We close sharply before or at 1 p.m. That's just by way of a reminder. Next agenda item, proposed tax concession for family offices.
So let me invite members of the Financial Services and the Treasury and the Hong Kong Monetary Authority to a meeting. You have the attendance list with you. I'm not going to read out the names to ensure smooth conduct of the meeting and for members to speak in an orderly manner. I will invite my staff to remove all the raised hand markings first. Now, members, if you want to speak, please press the raise hand button in Zoom and you will be invited to speak in that order. I will first invite Undersecretary for Financial Services and the Treasury, Mr. Joseph Chan, to walk us through the paper. Joseph, please be succinct. Thank you, Chairman. This paper briefs members on the legislative proposals to provide tax concession for eligible family-owned investment holding vehicles, FIHVs, managed by single-family offices, SFOs in Hong Kong. Family offices are private wealth management firms set up by ultra-high net worth individuals, UHNWIs, to generally oversee the day-to-day administration of their family assets. Hong Kong is the premier international financial center in the region, together with mutual access with mainland markets. We are an attractive place for UHNWIs to manage their portfolios in the region. With a substantial increase of UHNWIs in Asia, there have been a big drive in the demand for management of such assets. According to the survey announced in 2020 called Asset and Wealth Management Activity Survey, published by the SFC, in 2020, we recorded a 46% year-on-year increase to 2,037 billion Hong Kong dollars in Hong Kong's private banking and private wealth management business attributed to family offices and private trust clients. Our target is to further attract family offices to set up and operate in Hong Kong. Last year, through Investment Hong Kong, we set up Invest Hong Kong, we set up a dedicated team to provide one-stop service for family offices. Also, the Financial Secretary announced in the 2022-23 budget speech that we will provide tax concession for eligible family investment management entities managed by SFOs. Hence, this legislative proposal. This will provide tax certainty for FIHVs and SFOs. It will be conducive to attracting them to set up offices in Hong Kong. The details of the legislative proposals are as follows. The SFO or single family office must be a private company in Hong Kong, and it must be all the beneficial owners must be direct family members or related family members, and it must be exclusively and beneficially owned directly or indirectly by the single family holding the FIHV, and it should be a private company exercising CMC in Hong Kong. Also, the single family office's total asset managed should reach $240 million. Also, in a taxable year, these requirements should be met. For the period of year of assessment, that is employing the certain number of employees. In other words, they should employ not less than 2 full-time employees in Hong Kong who carry out the activities concerned. And also 2, they should incur not less than 2 million Hong Kong dollars operating expenditure in Hong Kong for carrying out the activities concerned. Once these conditions are met, tax concessions will be offered. This arrangement is on a par with the tax concessions for private equity funds. We're going to amend the anti-round tripping provisions as well. For example, there are the provisions applicable for funds with 2 carve-outs, resident individuals and resident non-individual entities. We believe the proposal will help bring more benefits and drive demand for other financial services. And single-family offices will play a more important role for channeling funds to IPOs in Hong Kong and also private philanthropy, so that the overall economy in Hong Kong will benefit. As FIHVs are usually set up offshore, and as it is our goal to attract them to set up offices in Hong Kong, it is difficult to estimate the revenue foregone arising from the tax concession proposal. But it is possible that the tax revenue foregone for granting tax concession to qualifying transactions of FIHVs may be offset partly by the revenue generated from an increase in business activities through the setting up of family offices in Hong Kong. We are consulting the sector on the proposal. Our target is to introduce the amendment bill into legislature in the second half of 2022. Once the legislative work is completed, the tax concession treatment will apply for years of assessment commencing on or after the 1st of April 2022. Thank you, Under Secretary. The floor is now open. I will invite members to speak. We can only allow 1 round for this item. Let me read out the names. Mr. Chan Kim-po, Mr. Duncan Chiu, Dr. Kennedy Wong, Mr. Nelson Lam, Mr. Edmund Wong, Mr. Rock Chen, Mr. Tang Yue-heng, Mr. Ronald Chan, Mr. Wong Yuen-shan, Deputy Chair, Dr. Johnny Ng. Each will have 3 minutes, questions and answers included, so please be succinct. We start with Mr. Chan Kim-po. Thank you, Chairman. Because of the recent happenings in Hong Kong, many people are emigrating and we have capital outflow. Of course, the FSTB must come up with better plans to attract capital inflow and talents. So I support this proposal, but I'd like the administration to clarify this point. In terms of the international tax reform framework for BEPS announced by the OECD, that is the minimum effective tax rate of 15% globally, I want to know whether this tax concession proposal is bound by this international treaty. You must make it clear whether we will be subject to BEPS 2.0 and that no tax avoidance can be allowed. Thank you. For multinational corporations reaching a global income threshold, they will be subject to BEPS 2.0 reform. So for single family offices, I don't think they'll be affected, but I'll defer to the IRD to supplement my answer. Thank you. I am Benjamin Chan from the IRD. Mr. Chan Kim-po, Mr. Chan made a valid point. In fact, BEPS 2.0 package means that the global effective tax rate of 15% will be levied. But as explained by Under Secretary Chan, this package only targets multinational corporations with income reaching certain threshold, and that is 750 euro. 750 million euro. For single family office, as long as it's not a multinational corporation or MNC with income exceeding 750 million euro, it will not be subject to the global minimum or global effective tax rate. Now, for family offices, usually the investment vehicles are held by individual family members. That is not the same as an MNC, which could be a parent company holding different companies. So the majority family offices will not be affected by BEPS. That is our general understanding. In general, they will not be affected. Next, Mr. Duncan Chiu. Thank you, Chairman. I welcome this proposal. On behalf of Hong Kong Venture Capital Association, I had a discussion with the government earlier on tax concessions. Of course, we welcome this proposal. However, at the time, we did raise this issue. For family offices in the mainland, it's very common that management is undertaken by not a single family office, but multiple family offices. So in short, that they may be required to get a license. For multiple family offices managing the family's assets is a rather common scenario. Should they be included? Or is it that because of the BEPS proposal, we cannot give it any consideration? Next, about our competitor Singapore, they are really aggressive. They even provide subsidies for setting up family offices. So how do we keep our edge? You mentioned the two ROs for $240 million turnover. What about a higher amount of assets managed to say 500 million or even $1 billion? Is it that can you allow two ROs to be designated for a high amount of assets managed? Under Secretary, we have been in close liaison with Mr. Chiu on promoting the setting up of family offices in Hong Kong, and I'm grateful. First, to answer his question on multi-family offices, MFOs, our current proposal does not include tax concessions for multi-family offices. The reason is that MFOs are usually independent service providers. The investment vehicles are usually not held by a single family. As the FIHVs are served by an MFO, which may be serving other vehicles or companies, there may be actual operational difficulties for us. For example, for an SFO to manage a number of FIHVs by different families in Hong Kong, it's difficult to assess the total assets under management, and we may not be able to ascertain the multiple FIHVs managed by MFOs meet our asset under management threshold. And it is not quite possible that the vehicles are exclusively and beneficially owned by a single family. So there is question over the major business activities of the office. And I want to emphasize that the latter requirement is subject to the scrutiny of the Forum on Harmful Tax Practices of the OECD. So these are the practical difficulties. As the majority of multiple family offices are third-party service providers, if need be, they can hire licensed entities in Hong Kong, including MFOs, for their service in Hong Kong. So I think in general, our proposal will benefit the whole sector. Please be succinct. Responding to Mr. Chiu's suggestion, we note your suggestion. At the same time, we're consulting the sector. We'll continue to listen to the views of the sector.
Concerning Singapore, because of time considerations for this particular proposed tax concession for family offices, it is exactly to raise our competitiveness. And together with Investment Hong Kong, other colleagues, we are working towards the promotion of wealth management business in Hong Kong. Now, if you have further information, would you please provide information to this panel so that we can look at them? Next, Kenneth Wong. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would like to say we welcome FSTB's proposal, and that is I am in support of this proposal and its intention. Now, whether it is in assets or manpower, we want to be able to increase both in this sector. Now, for funds, apart from tax concessions, actually, funds safety or security is also very important. So apart from looking at Singapore, I hope the authorities will also look at Switzerland, because Switzerland and Singapore have both joined the countries that are sanctioning Russia, given the Russian-Ukraine war recently. And these are wealth management centers both. Now in Hong Kong, we have the basic law protecting private ownership of properties. Of course, foreign affairs and foreign relations is within the ambit of the central government office. And we have not, Hong Kong had not joined the sanctioning as promoted by the UN. So for these very important legal basis and our policy, I hope the Hong Kong SAR government would tell the story, tell the world about this. For instance, these family offices, on the one hand, we have the funding consideration, the other is for the employees, and they can also provide Hong Kong or apply for Hong Kong residency for them. And we hope the setting up of family offices in Hong Kong would attract more financial experts to Hong Kong. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Wong. It is true that one of the major attractions of Hong Kong is a free flow, inflow and outflow of capital. And this is also protected by the basic law. And we see certain countries with unilateral sanctions and limiting funds flow or capital flow in and out of the country. This definitely would not be attractive for any wealth management entities to set up shop there. So yes, with the HK Invest Hong Kong, we will be enhancing Hong Kong's attractiveness. Now, for immigration policies, we have the general employment policies and also the special talents attraction policies to attract more talents and special professionals into Hong Kong. We have these policies, and I have heard the views, and we will step up with these efforts. Right. Next member, Professor Nelson Lam. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chan. I have just a very simple question, and that is, I very much agree with both Kennedy Wong and also Duncan Chiu in saying that we emphasize that this is a single family office for wealth management. And in fact, all around the world, there are these multiple family offices in operation. Of course, it will be a lot more complicated for the latter, and we can proceed progressively. And for this proposed tax concession, it is to raise Hong Kong's image and position as a wealth management center, especially for family-owned investment holding vehicles. As an accountant, of course, I'm all for this, but as a general member of the public in Hong Kong, will there be a feeling that those who are wealthy will become more wealthy and those who are poor will become poorer? That is, in public education, in attracting foreign funds to Hong Kong for wealth management, in attracting talents to Hong Kong. I think the authorities need to do more work. We now have BPS 2.0 concerning the minimum tax rate. And also because of this new exemption and tax concession, some of the wealthy families, when they set up shop or office in Hong Kong, how this would impact the GDP of Hong Kong, how it would enhance Hong Kong's wealth management position, how it would attract or nurture talents. I hope that there can be more such education and publicity, especially for the more grassroots members of our society. Well, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Professor Lam, for the suggestion. For multi-family office, I will not repeat myself because of tax arrangements. There are certain tax considerations which are within the ambit of the OECD Forum on Harmful Tax Practices scrutiny. So we will start with the SFO, and we will be listening to the views of the relevant sectors. Now, for tax concession, indeed, it will benefit our economy in Hong Kong and economic activities in Hong Kong, and also the employment would also be positively affected. And the legislative intent or the policy intent is exactly so, and that is raise the position of Hong Kong as a wealth management center globally. And the relevant services, including accounting services and legal services, will also be given impetus for development. Thank you. We will do this work well. Thank you, Chair. Next, we will have Edmund Wong. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Chan. I'm sure the different sectors, including the finance industry and also the accounting sector, etc., will benefit. It is providing more business for us and providing quality employment opportunities for us. And compared to some of the neighboring areas, for example, Singapore, it is indeed a benchmark. Singapore is very proactively promoting this, and our professionals in Hong Kong, we see such a big business opportunity. Going to Singapore without being able to partake of it, of course, is a disappointment. But this time, we see that there is direct comparison or benchmarking with Singapore. And with this proposed tax concession, whether it is legislative revision, etc., it is more stringent than Singapore. For example, it needs a SFC for the family-owned investment holding vehicle, and also there is this 5% rate. So what is your intended target of attraction? Singapore is already way ahead of us. For example, for Hong Kong vaccination, it is said that it will help us combat COVID. But now we see that it cannot actually fight COVID for Hong Kong, even with the implementation of this policy. It doesn't help much. And same here, I would like to know, what is your ultimate objective? Does it really help? Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. There are a number of policies related. I will speak succinctly. There's one point I would want to put across, and that is for this tax concession for family offices that we're proposing, these family offices do not need to be licensed by the SFC. family offices, as the industry knows, according to the Securities Ordinance in Hong Kong, it is activities-based. If the family office has business related that are related to the relevant regulated activities, then they would attract this regulatory sanctioning. Otherwise, it would not. And also, we request that there is control in Hong Kong, centrally managed in Hong Kong, so that these family offices have actual activities in Hong Kong, bringing actual benefits to the economy of Hong Kong. That is a design. So for the proposed tax concession for family offices, on the one hand, we want to comply with certain international tax practices, as mentioned, the one from OECD, and at the same time, they actually bring beneficial activities to Hong Kong. We will closely look at the situation, including our competitors such as Singapore, and to strengthen our family offices promotion policy. Next to speak, we have Chan Chung-Li. Yes, I myself and DAB are in support of this proposed tax concession for family offices. But still, I want to pursue on the competition with Singapore. As you know, in 2020, Singapore had already come up with a completely new fund structure, and that is for umbrella funds with a number of constituent funds. The multiple family office actually would see this as a very familiar feature, and these constituent funds and the umbrella fund on top would both have benefit from tax concession. So for this proposed tax concession of ours, it is relatively conservative, especially given the fifth wave of COVID. A lot of monies and people have moved to Singapore. So this is of core importance. And also in the paper 7E, it talks about exempted investment qualifications. It says that you must not directly engage in activities for general commercial or industrial purposes, but very often these single families, they would put individual blocks or buildings into the family office mandate. Let's say for these families, the descendants of the families, where they want to redevelop the buildings, or they sell off the properties and they get the benefits, will these activities benefit from this tax concession, please? Well, thank you very much for the question. First of all, compared to Singapore, I have to emphasize that if Hong Kong is in Hong Kong, where there is eligibility for this tax concession for single family office, the tax rate is actually 0. So it would be the same as any so-called competitors. It would be 0 tax rate. So there is no difference. Now, for the funds, it is a little bit more complicated. Let me just say that at present in Hong Kong, for funds, whether they are publicly offered or privately placed funds, whether they are OFCs, there will already be a tax concession. For limited partnership funds, we have just introduced a carried interest tax concession. So Hong Kong, I believe, will be at par in competitiveness in these regards with other areas. Now, and for the other activities or commercial or industrial activities that are not allowed for the single family offices, we will stand by this, because these family offices are to manage the wealth of the single families, and this is not to be abused. Thank you. Yes, next we will have Dr. Tam Yuen-shan. Thank you very much. Chair. When we discuss a tax concession for single-family offices, I think this is a step forward in the right way, and it will raise Hong Kong as a hub for family offices. I have a few questions. The first question, for single-family offices, the definition of that. Is it sufficiently clear? And this definition in the Hong Kong understanding and standards, is it competitive compared to some of our competitors? And how do we define single-family office? And second question, for tax concessions for the family offices, I see that these are basically just capital market transactions tax concessions. Does it really include all the mainstream investment activities of the family offices? Or would there be additions in the future? Digital products, for example, ESG products, limit partnerships, funds, etc. Would those be included in the future?
Third, on risk assessment, the SFO activities are important financial activities. What about the capital reserve liquidity of SFOs? Can you ensure that the risks entailed can be controlled because of the possible risk spreading? Should you set up some kind of regulation over these offices? On the Secretary, I understand that there are 3 questions. First, on the definition of single-family offices and the scope and whether we are competitive. I reiterate what I said before. We focus on single-family offices in our current proposal, and I've already explained. There are also considerations based on the international tax treaties. As for multiple family offices, we'll continue to collect views on the definition of single family offices. We have included the views expressed during our consultation with the industry. The consultation will last until the 8th of April. So in drawing up the bill, we will consider fully the views of the sector. Will ensure that the views are properly expressed. For eligible transactions, they will be on a par with these transactions carried out by the single family offices. They will be listed in the schedule. I see that my time is up. We'll provide supplementary information in due course. Perhaps I'll give time to the IRD now. Thank you, Chair. The objective of our proposal is to provide the same tax treatment to funds as well as single family offices. So the same kind of tax concessions will be offered. Basically, we include financial products, shares. We have, of course, received views from the sector, and in future, perhaps we'll consider revising this list. Next, Mr. Ronald Chan. Thank you, Chairman. I support this proposed tax concession for family offices so as to attract them to set up their offices in Hong Kong. In 2020, there are 50 SFOs registered with the SFC. According to the Electrical Research Division, at the same time, some 400 family offices were set up in Singapore. The majority of them being set up between 2017 and 2019, that represents a 4-time increase. So if our policy is right, we could strive for the same rate of growth as well. However, I have a point here. If we are going to provide tax concessions, are we going to set a target? Say the increase in the number of family offices set up in Hong Kong from 50 to 100 or 200, so that we have a target to work on. The monetary authority in Singapore had this measure. Although the Undersecretary explains that not all family offices are required to be licensed in Hong Kong, the monetary authority in Singapore offers exemption of licenses for the family offices together with tax concessions. Will the administration consider the Singapore's approach so that our regulator will have flexibility in providing exemptions? And the Secretary. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Member, for the questions. I want to emphasize that in light of the current development, in fact, the member just referred to 50 offices set up in 2020, and he actually mentioned that these are family offices licensed by the SFC operating in Hong Kong. There are other family offices operating in Hong Kong that are not required to hold a license because, as explained just now, if these family offices do not carry out regulated activities, they are not required to hold the license. So we don't have the exact number of family offices in Hong Kong. We don't have the total figure of family offices with and without SFC licenses. On how we should measure our progress, according to the SFC's Asset and Wealth Management Activity Survey conducted in 2020, we recorded a 46% year-on-year increase in 2020 in Hong Kong's private banking and private wealth management business attributed to family offices and private trust clients. And I think the 46% increase could help us gauge the increase in private banking and private wealth management business. It is true that we should strive for reaching a policy target. So meanwhile, we will collect the relevant data after implementing the tax concession. Namely, how many FIHVs there are in Hong Kong managed by SFOs, the number of employees involved. And with this, with the data available, we will be reviewing the effectiveness of the policy. Mr. Wong Yuen-shan. Thank you, Chairman. I have 2 follow-up questions. First, in Singapore, apart from the tax incentive, they also want to attract foreign talents. Meanwhile, they make a lot of effort in grooming local talents. So, Undersecretary, will you consider taking this 2-prong approach? Whilst undertaking development of the financial market, will you consider measures to support the grooming of local talents to support the sector? For example, can you include this in your requirements? That is, in order to qualify for tax concession, the SFO should employ a certain number of local employees so as to provide more jobs locally. Second, tax concession is one way of promoting family offices in Hong Kong. As mentioned by another member, and as answered by the Undersecretary, we do have relevant schemes for attracting talents. However, I want to know whether you have a package of measures so that apart from offering tax concessions, you can have a more holistic plan in attracting family offices to set up the office to be set up in Hong Kong. Under Secretary, thank you for the questions. First, on talent. Talents are important in our effort in developing family offices and private wealth management. We have various schemes to promote the grooming of talents. In 2016, for example, we have a pilot training scheme on nurturing talents in the insurance and private wealth management industries. And we also have courses run by institutions in Hong Kong. And Mr. Wong is one of the board members of the FSDC, and the council also drives the development of the industry by providing subsidies to enterprises hiring local graduates. As for the minimum number of employees, at the moment, in order to qualify for tax concession in the year of assessment, the FIHV should employ not less than 2 full-time employees in Hong Kong, and they should incur not less than 2 million Hong Kong dollars of operating expenditure for carrying out substantial activities in Hong Kong. We believe this will help boost jobs in Hong Kong. Before I invite the next member to speak, I see that Mr. Sunny Tan just raised his hand, so he will be the last one to speak for the item. I'll draw a line here. Now I invite Mr. Johnny Ng to speak. Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, Under Secretary. The proposal seeks to attract family offices to be set up in Hong Kong. Apart from tax concessions, we can have other initiatives. I understand from the sector that the one major issue is that the tycoons would like to get permanent residency in Hong Kong. In Singapore, they have such a scheme. For expatriates meeting certain capital requirements, they will have a fast pass to obtaining residency in Singapore. So I'd like to know from the administration whether we can roll out something similar in Hong Kong. Under Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Member, for the question. Our current proposal focuses on tax concessions for family offices, but we note members' comment. As far as immigration policy is concerned, we have the general admission scheme, talent admission scheme, and also talent migration scheme, talent migrants admission scheme. As to whether we can have other special immigration measures for family offices and other financial talents, I note your view and will continue to explore the issue within the Bureau. As for another comment, that is how we can give full play to our advantages and publicize our policies. In June 2021, Invest Hong Kong set up a dedicated team to promote family offices in Hong Kong. The team is now in full commission, and since June last year, the team has successfully helped 11 family offices in tapping the Hong Kong market. The family offices come from ASEAN countries, mainland, etc., and will continue to leverage on the Invest Hong Kong's team's capability to attract more family offices to set up their businesses in Hong Kong. Next, Mr. Sunny Tan. Thank you, Chairman. In general, I support this proposal of offering tax concessions to family offices. together with Mr. Rock Chen and Mr. Wong Yuen-shan, I also attach great importance to our comparison with Singapore, and I hope the FSTB will look into this. In terms of our traditional commerce industrial sectors, every now and then we do need to review the available tax concessions and whether they are effective in promoting the development of the CNI sectors in Hong Kong. So I hope that you take a more focused approach and promote tax measures more aggressively. Under Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Member, for the comment. We'll continue to take a multi-pronged approach, be it tax concessions for family offices or other initiatives relating to the financial services industry or even the CNI sector. We'll continue to liaise with members closely and continue to listen to members' views so that we will continue to enhance Hong Kong's competitiveness while meeting the international tax treaties requirements.
Lastly, just for the Undersecretary, it mentions in the paper there that these family offices are set up by ultra-high net worth individuals, and these offices are responsible for the day-to-day management of the family offices. And these ultra-high net worth individuals would be at least 30 million US dollars as investable funds. And for these individuals, I think Hong Kong is number 2 with the number of such ultra-high net worth individuals being in Hong Kong. Now, my question is, Singapore is very proactive in this regard, and a lot of members have said that Singapore, of course, wants to overtake Hong Kong. And in terms of these, and Hong Kong is actually second behind New York for the second highest global cities for these ultra-high net worth individuals. So what do you have in terms of response to Singapore wanting to overtake Hong Kong? Well, Mr. Chairman, in answer to your question, actually Hong Kong is in the leading position and in a mature position in providing services to these ultra-high net worth individuals. And as a cross-border wealth management center, Hong Kong is number 1 in Asia, number 2 globally. And I hope you understand that Hong Kong already has a competitive edge as it stands. But of course, we have to step up with our efforts because the likes of Singapore and others in the neighboring countries are stepping up with their efforts as well. And as mentioned just now, for the family offices, we are providing this proposed tax concession, and the Invest Hong Kong office in this regard, they have already been pushing ahead, even with just a short 1 year of setting up a business for this area. Now, the consultation period is still ongoing until the 8th of April. Apart from tax concession as proposed, there are other policies to support the setup of family offices in Hong Kong. And after the consultation period, we will collate the views and will formulate policies for future enactment. Well, I think if we want to pull ahead, we have to see who's hot on our tails. We have to look into the rearview mirror to see what they are doing, for example, Singapore. Thank you, Undersecretary. Anything else from you, Undersecretary, or from the IRD, please? If not, well, according to the paper from the government, they would want to introduce the bill in the second half of this legislative year to the Legislative Council. And if it is passed, then the tax concession treatment will apply for any years of assessment commencing on or after the 1st of April 2022. Are we all in support of this, please? Any objections, please? I think most of the members are in support. We will duly note this. And thank you for attending this meeting, representatives of the government. Let us go to the next agenda item. Agenda item number 8, proposed legislative amendments to facilitate mandatory Provident Fund investment in debt securities issued in the mainland and progress update on the eMPF platform project. First of all, we will have from the FSTB, the permanent secretary, and also her colleagues, as well as from the Mandatory Provident Fund Schemes Authority to speak. Now, first of all, would you all clear the raise hand sign for this new agenda item? Yes, and now would you please indicate your intention to speak on the Zoom platform? First of all, I will have Ms. Selina Yan, Permanent Secretary for FSTB, to go through with us the paper here. Well, members, Chairman, thank you. First of all, we are proposing that we amend the 7.1 of the schedule for the proposed legislative amendments so as to facilitate investment by the Mandatory Provident Fund, MPF funds, in debt securities issued or guaranteed by the Central People's Government, PBOC, People's Bank of China, and the 3 mainland policy banks, namely Agricultural Development Bank, China Development Bank, and Export Bank, Import Bank of China, so as to maximize on the opportunities afforded by the Central People's Government, and to increase on investment options for MPF funds. For example, in November 2020, the MPFA had added the Shanghai and Shenzhen stock exchanges to the list of approved stock exchanges, facilitating thereby investment by MPF funds into shares listed in the mainland. And the response was very good. As of the 31st of December 2021, exposure of MPF funds in China A shares has more than doubled to around 33.1 billion Hong Kong dollars. The mainland bonds market is the second largest in the world and number 1 in Asia. And the policy banks, as well as the central bank, and those bonds issued by the CPG are limited to 10% of the total MPF scheme investments. And at present, it is but 0.28% or $3.5 billion in terms of total exposure as it stands now. And for if we are to increase to have this legislative amendment, we will be able to increase the ceiling to that is invest up to 30% of the total funds in debt securities for the same issued or unconditionally guaranteed by an exempt authority, and invest all of the funds of the constituent funds in debt securities of the same issuer comprising at least 6 different issues. And we would want to be able to have your blessing to go through with this processed amendment, and we would want to propose to introduce the amendment to the regulation at the LegCo through a positive vetting procedure in early June 22 and take effect upon Gazettal in mid-June 2022 at the earliest. And we would want to take this opportunity to share with members the latest development of the eMPF platform. It is now in a very critical stage, final stage of development for the eMPF platform. The legislative foundation had already been laid, and last year, January, it had already been started, the design and also the building of the platform for eMPF platform. The contractor had been appointed as well. And the project had already started. The MPFA, together with the had already set up a company to take up this particular job of that is incorporating an eMPF platform company to take up the design and building of the platform, and together with the appointed contractor to together build this eMPF platform company. And there had been a consultation period, and we are listening to not only employers but also employees, and also there is a study of the MPF guidelines so that trustees can smoothly transition through to eMPF platform. And the eMPF platform company is drawing up a set of rules for operation of the eMPF system. As for the timing of joining or onboarding onto the eMPF platform, in order for the first stage of the platform that it should be smooth, there had already been 5 trustees which have been accepted as early joiners, so that by April of 2023, as a first stage, they will be the first joiners. And also these trustees and their funds will follow the relevant order to adopt the eMPF platform after the first 5 early adopter trustees. And for this amendment, we would want this to be in negative voting process, and then the gazettal is planned for first quarter of 2023, where all the trustees and their schemes had been transitioned. We want this eMPF platform to be fully functional by 2025. Yes, the following, Chen Kin-Paul, Chen Pui-Leung, Wong Chun-shek, Sarah Lee, Chen Chung-Lee, and Li Wei-Weng, and the Vice Chairman, Mr. Wong, and Professor Nelson Lam have indicated they want to speak. Anybody else? If not, we'll draw the line there. I will have Q&A 3 minutes each. First of all, we will have Chen Kin-Paul to speak. Thank you, Chair. The new development and also the timetable have been shared, and for the 2023 to have the system ready, that is reasonable. We hope that the MPFA will continue to monitor the progress of this platform, because if this cannot be commenced in operation by the relevant date, there will be grievances from employers and employees. And I see that a lot of the administration work is now paper-based, and this e-platform hopefully will be able to cut down on the paper-based administration. Otherwise, the millions of dollars invested into the building of the MPF platform will come to naught. So what about those employers who consistently and to insist on retaining the paper-based system? Are there penalties you intend for them? First of all, we want the platform to be easy to use and attractive for people to go on board. That is the first point. And in the first phase of operation, in the operation center, we will have certain nodes to make it convenient for users in the using of the eMPF platform. They have someone to talk to seek help, and rather than to be frustrated and resort to paper-based administration. To have someone answer their questions is important. And also for the contractor, for the eMPF platform project, in the first few years of the platform, they will increase the digital usage to 90% for administrative work. And this is an incentive for them in designing the platform and in teaching the users to use the platform to put in their resources and efforts to the full.
Next, Mr. Chen Pui-Leung. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I support the proposed legislative amendments to facilitate MPF investment in debt securities issued in the mainland so that we have more investment options for MPF to invest in quality products. On the eMPF platform, I have two questions. I see major reduction in administrative costs. In the first 2 years, it will be cut by 30%. So that's comparing to the current MPF system. Do we have a comparison with similar Provident fund mechanisms in other countries? Do we have this comparison? Second, it will be introduced in phases. In the first phase, there'll be 5 trustees taking part in it. May I know the scale and the asset under management by these trustees? Are they representative enough? For trustees in the first stage, will it be the case that they charge a lower level of administrative fees, whereas for those trustees not yet joining the platform, they charge higher fees so that it's not a level playing field? Thank you for the questions. The objective, of course, is to suppress administrative costs so that scheme members in the end stand to benefit. That is the major drive. At the outset, we're able to cut costs by 30%. And this is a major achievement locally. At the same time, we make reference to overseas platforms. And I'll see if the MPFA has anything to supplement. I'd like to stress, however, that in terms of our legislative proposal, we will make sure that the 30% reduction will directly benefit scheme members. In other words, we have 2 levels. Apart from actual reduction in the MPF administrative fee, overall speaking, the 30% cost reduction must be reflected in the MPF platform. Apart from reducing administrative fees, there must be actual cost reduction. This is an important element in the design of the platform. As for the other question, I'll defer to the MPFA. Sorry, but the time is up. You only have 30 seconds. Please be succinct. I'm Chang En-chi. I'm Managing Director of the MPFA. Let me take this succinct question. We have made comparisons with overseas counterparts. However, we must bear in mind the different nature of different platforms. We have regard to our local circumstances and try to suppress administrative fees. In fact, comparing to the previous administrative fee level, we have reduced it by 30%. And we have also instantly cut costs by 30%. And cumulatively, we should be able to have cost savings of 40%. Well, we don't need to repeat because I think the permanent secretary already explained it fully. Next, Mr. Edmund Wong. Thank you, Chairman. As a member of the bill relating to the abolition of the MPF offsetting mechanism, I understand the crux of the MPF or eMPF platform. Paragraph 16 refers to 27 schemes under the MPF system having different sizes of AUM and varying degree of other matters. Just now, as explained by the administration, the MPFA has accepted 5 applications from trustees. What about the $210 million set aside to support the pioneers? How many are they receiving? How much are they receiving? And also, how do you assess the amount of subsidies to be given to early adopters? Will the authority continue to oversee the migration of trustees to the eMPF platform? And if anything goes wrong, will there be further support for them? Who will take the question, please? Let me take this question. Thank you, PS. Well, we didn't have time to answer Mr. Chan's question, and together with Mr. Wong's question, I would say that these 5, the questions are related. Earlier, the MPFA extended invitation to trustees, and after selection, 5 trustees successfully applied to become early adopters of the eMPF platform in the first phase. We have BOC, Trustee, Bank of Communication, Bank of East Asia, and 2 other trustees in the first phase. In terms of asset under management or membership accounts, I would say that they are of scale and they meet the requirements set out in the MPFA's invitation. At the same time, we are grateful for their acceptance to our invitation to become early adopters. We do provide financial incentive ranging from $3,000 to some $40,000 as an early adopter of the eMPF platform. And once they have been migrated to the platform, they will adjust the administrative fees. So through implementing the platform in phases and progressive migration of trustees, we ensure smooth operation of the platform. Next, Ms. Dari Lee. First of all, I support the legislative proposal to allow MPF investment in debt securities issued in the mainland. This offers a more diversified investment choice for the MPFA. We also support the eMPF platform. I think that anyone who have had hands-on experience in accessing the MPF app website for MPF related information would say there is much more to be desired. I understand that as a public body, you face certain constraints, but at least you should improve the aspect of information dissemination. It's not easy to even look for the MPF trustees and their fund performance. Instead, one would turn to a private companies website for comparing different trustees. So apart from setting up a platform with the issue of offsetting mechanism addressed, I think more and more MPF scheme members will be making use of the platform. So apart from setting up the eMPF platform, you can also make improvements to your own website so that it will be more convenient for scheme members to check the information and enhance the public's knowledge on MPF. PS. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Dari Lee, for her comments and her support. We fully agree that we need to think out of the box, and that is why for the first time we include the debt securities issued by the mainland authority and the relevant banks in our exempted list, and that's innovative. At the same time, apart from developing the eMPF platform, at this stage, we understand we should make good use of technology to improve the efficiency of the platform for disseminating MPF related information for scheme members. I'll see if the MPFA has anything to supplement. Ms. Lee, we thank you for the comments. We'll continue to improve our current platform, that is the MPFA's platform. We're not sitting on our hands and wait for the rollout of the eMPF platform. Next, Mr. Rock Chen. Thank you, Chairman. Declaration of interest. I invest in debt securities issued by the mainland authorities. The DAB and myself are grateful for the administration's effort in heeding our views and allowing MPF investment in debt securities issued in the mainland. Under the new measure, the MPF constituent fund could invest up to 30% of its total funds in debt securities and may invest all of the funds of the MPF constituent fund in debt securities of the same issue comprising at least 6 different issues, as long as there is reasonable portfolio of assets. Well, of course, we understand for exempt authority, they have a higher rating and a lower risk of defaulting. However, the high concentration of assets is somewhat against the normal philosophy of low risk portfolio. And also, according to the paper, there may be further consideration of expanding the scope and including the other provincial that securities issued at the provincial level. But I want to say that for the provincial authorities, they may have a very different risk profile. Even state-owned enterprises in the mainland have the risk of default. So I asked the government to be very prudent, very cautious in expanding the list of government bodies as exempt authorities, such as provincial government. Yes, thank you. In terms of risk diversion, we do share your view. That is why we cap the investment level at 30% of the total funds in debt securities. And we also require, for example, the investment of all the funds of the fund in 6 different issues, not in a single issue. That is a strategy of risk management. As for the this arrangement, it is in line with the Code on Unit Trust, and let me reassure members that we are not casually including more issuers in the exempt authority list. They must be of quality and they must be a robust issuer before we give any consideration. And this will continue to be our attitude in considering the list. Hong Kong is a premium debt issuing platform. We welcome provincial governments in issuing debts in Hong Kong. In fact, the Shenzhen municipal government recently issued green bonds in Hong Kong. But of course, as an issuer, they must fulfill requirements in Hong Kong. And if they are to be included as an exempt authority in our MPF system, we need to consider the operation and other requirements of the issuer.
Move from a passive investment. I would like to know whether we have a timeline, how we can lower costs so that investors can have higher returns as the costs come down. Secretary General, thank you, Mr. Lee, Dr. Lee, for the support. Developing Hong Kong's debt securities market is another important target of ours, especially for the retail investments in debt securities. This is important as well. We want to take the lead, and in the past 3 years, the government had issued 83 billion Hong Kong dollars retail bonds, and that is a huge quantity. And lately, we have a new think out of the box project, and that is to launch the retail green bonds. At the right time, we will be reactivating that. And this provides further investment opportunities or choice for retirement protection. And this is another main target of ours. And this would also include exchange-based investment funds, etc. If we have more products for choice, and if we can bring on more service providers, and also if we provide mechanisms to gradually lower the service fees, this would definitely be the goals of ours and that of the MPFA. And we have made progress in all these directions. With the MPF platform built in a number of areas, such as products available for investment, the choice of products, and also in costs of fees, they will all benefit. Vice Chair, Dr. Wong Yuen-shan. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'm in support of providing debt securities issued in the mainland for MPF investment. I look at the guidelines here concerning the credit rating agency. What is the relevant credit rating agencies? It seems that they are just the ordinary Moody's, S&P, and Fitch. I know that there are mainland credit rating agencies as well. Can we perhaps broaden the guidelines so as to contribute to Hong Kong and also to the mainland where it is appropriate for Hong Kong, so that we can further develop this offshore market? Secondly, I of course support the eMPF platform. We know that it is a platform which has a single point of failure arising from IT, and it can bring on systemic risks. Can we learn more about the risk management of the platform, please? The third point, with more choice for investments, Secretary General, can you perhaps consider for eMPF, perhaps in the future through any trustee, they can purchase any of the investment funds that is approved by the MPF, and that is, we do not limit the investment funds to particular trustees. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the questions. First of all, we are also in agreement with this, and that is for the credit rating agencies. On the name list of credit rating agencies, we actually welcome extending that to include any credit rating agencies that qualify. And we very much welcome credit rating agencies to come to the MPFA to look at furthering or extending the list. Now, secondly, for infrastructure, for any e-platform, and where the e-platform is a centralized system, it is very important that there is risk management for IT. I will not be going into the details of IT risk management for the eMPF system or platform, but there will be a number of areas of risk management. First of all, the eMPF platform company limited itself will conduct such work, and also there'll be third-party service providers which will help in minimizing the risks. And we will be able to, they will be able to foresee any risks. Of course, there will be contingency processes put in as well. And lastly, for the choice of products and trustees, this is also our long-term objective. For eMPF platform, when it is fully running, the information flow will be a lot smoother. This is not just about reporting, but also about product choice. And whether at some point there can be transactions made on the eMPF platform. With the platform built, there can be a lot of possibilities, and we will be looking into those. And next, Professor Nelson Lam. Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, Chair. I have a very simple question, and that is, it's been a number of years that the MPF have been put into practice, and we have over 1,000 billion in terms of AUM under MPF schemes. Perhaps the MPF should reposition itself in terms of the MPF's role in wealth management and in Hong Kong, and also stabilizing the financial system in Hong Kong. And also, as Hong Kong integrates with the country's development, the MPF also has a role to play. I'm very much in support with the proposals put forward today. A number of members just now have spoken about risk management, for instance. There can be different risks. One, geographical location related. Secondly, forex risk related. In these two areas, we need to suitably manage such risks. And in so doing, there will be fees or costs attracted. So I think the MPFA will have to look into the trustees' risk management. And the fees for the trustees have always been relatively high already. And further, for eMPF platform commencement, we hope in the long run it will resolve the issue of overly high fees charged by the trustees. And Mr. Wong had mentioned just now, this is a new platform. It is a huge centralized platform, and there will be a lot of issues related to it. The MPFA, I hope, will come back to this panel, to the lecture regularly, to speak to the timetable of completion of the platform. For instance, we're talking about 4.5 million Hong Kong people using this system, and we really want to know whether indeed the platform can be completed by 2025. Secretary General, now because of time, we note Professor Lam's questions. We will very earnestly look at the situation, especially the MPF being a very important part of our financial management, and it is highly related to the benefits and welfare of the Hong Kong people. We are fully in agreement with the second point, and that is the timetable of the launch of the eMPF platform is important. It is a huge platform, and we will be putting in all our efforts to be able to bring the platform online in time, and so that our employers and the employees will be able to enjoy the eMPF platform on a timely basis. The last question for the Secretary General. I know that the building of the eMPF platform and the offsetting of the MPF, there are a number of issues for the latter, that is offsetting for MPF contributions. And some members are just worried that it will increase the business sectors or employers' burden. Now, without eMPF platform, then the employers will have to build their own platform. So in a sense, it also helps with the cost reduction. Now, for the timetable, will the 2025 completion date be affected by various factors? Well, I know for labor and welfare, they are going through with all efforts on the legislative process, and they have been answering members' questions. As for the eMPF platform, as mentioned by other members, we will put in all our efforts to complete the system by the date mentioned, and all the contractors and entities concerned will do the same. We know that developing a platform requires investments and costs, and we do not want to add to the burden of employers or employees. The government has put in its investments. You would remember that some time ago, the government had been given approval by the finance panel, and the lecture had also passed that there would be a cost provided by the government for the development of the platform. And the government wants this to be a contribution from the government. There would not be any recuperation of their investments to increase the burden of the stakeholders, but rather we want to be able to build a useful tool for all. Well, thank you. Well, I hope this is a commitment on your part. Because very often in administration, it is said that the employers should chip in more, and and they very often just increase on the penalties that can be meted out to employers. Now, if there should be any issues, unforeseen issues, or whatever complicating issues that would delay the eMPF platform launch, would you please come to us as soon as possible, inform us. Right. The intention is for the working target is to complete the development of the platform by the end of 2022, and at the earliest to enable onboarding from around April 2023, and the platform to be made fully functional in 2025. Are we all in agreement? Yes, most of the members are in agreement. Thank you for participating in this agenda item, representatives of the government. Next, we have AOB. Any AOB? None from me. If there's none from you, we will end this meeting here. Thank you very much. Goodbye.